Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Happy Monday. It is July 21st, 2025, moving quickly through the month of July. Unfortunately, summer goes by too fast. Deacon Dom and I were out over the weekend running errands and doing some shopping and looking around. And oh, yes, of course, Halloween everywhere. Back to school has long been everywhere since right around 4th of July or maybe even earlier. But everybody is always rushing things and rushing the season, especially in the retail world. And later on in the program, in 2 cents, we're going to be talking about, based on the Holy Father's beautiful homily and message in Castel Gandolfo yesterday and the reflection on the readings, the importance of slowing down and being present for the Lord. So we'll talk about that in the next program. More on the rundown for the second hour coming up. But out of the gate, as we say, after the weather and the news this morning, our very own Matt Swaim from the Sunrise Morning Show and the Journey Home will be joining us, talking about Journey Home highlights and whatever other topics we decide to discuss. So always look forward to that. And then Michael New, of course, who is an expert on many issues, including research. He does a lot of research in the pro-life world. And he's bringing us some new information regarding public policy changes that are playing a major role in abortion increases, especially overseas. As a matter of fact, Catholic News Agency and the National Catholic Register had a very good report last week about the unfortunate rise of abortion in Ireland, such a Catholic nation, or at least it used to be. So we'll talk with Michael about that. And then shortly before the end of this first hour, we have the Bible lady, Gail Buckley, with Catholic Scripture Study International. That's a great Bible study, by the way, if you want to look into it. Our verse for today is from the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 7, and I love this verse, verse 14. In the day of prosperity be joyful, and in the day of adversity consider God has made the one as well as the other. So I think this is a great reminder for us that we are all excited and all into the faith. We all do this, right? When things are going well, but when things are not going well, we don't like to suffer. We're human. It's our fallen nature, right? And we have to remember that God will always find a way for us, and he never leaves us alone. And so I think this is a very important lesson we shall discuss with Gail, and that's coming up in a bit toward the end of the first hour of the program on a Monday. Ecclesiastes 7, verse 14. Jot it down. It's nice to jot these verses down. This is why we give it to you on a Monday, so you can go back and ponder and reflect upon it during the week. So Ecclesiastes 7:14, in the day of prosperity be joyful, in the day of adversity consider that God has made the one as well as the other. So that is the first hour of the program this morning on EWTN's Catholic Connection. The weather, there's some real concerns about heat, a heat wave. National Weather Service telling us this morning the heat will increase and expand across the Central Plains and Mississippi Valley, the southeast, and into the eastern U.S. through the week. In high pressure builds across the eastern two-thirds of the country. On the northern area, the threat for severe thunderstorms and heavy rainfall across the northern plains and upper Midwest is continuing through tomorrow. And then we have some major issues of critical fire weather in the western part of the country. So keep that in mind wherever you may be going. We appreciate your listenership here on a Monday and every day, Monday through Friday, on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. A lot of news to get through, never a dull moment. 3 minutes past the hour now. Let's check and see what's happening in and around the world on a Monday morning here on EWTN. Vatican News reporting this morning amid continuing violence in the Holy Land, the Holy Father holding a telephone call this morning with Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the state of Palestine. According to a statement released by the Holy See Press Office, the Pope receiving a call from Abbas during which they discussed recent developments in the conflict in Gaza and violence in the West Bank. In a statement, the Vatican saying during the phone call, the Holy Father repeated his international plea for humanitarian law to be fully respected, emphasizing in particular the obligation to protect civilians and sacred sites, the prohibition of the indiscriminate use of force, and of the forced transfer of the population. Meanwhile, marking his third Sunday at the papal summer residence in the Castel Gandolfo area, Pope Leo presiding over Mass for the 16th Sunday in Ordinary Time. Reflecting upon the first reading in the Gospel, he said these passages call us to reflect on hospitality, service, and listening. The Pope first looking at the first reading from Genesis, where 3 men visit Abraham in the heat of the day. The Holy Father pointing out how Abraham's response as master of the house was one of hospitality. Turning to the Gospel, the Holy Father commented on how the passage teaches us about God's way of acting. Jesus came as a guest in the house of Martha and Mary, not as a stranger, but as a friend during a celebration. Martha welcomes him by serving, while Mary sits at his feet to listen to him. Jesus responded to Martha's comments by inviting her to see the value of listening. Yet Pope Leo stressed it would be incorrect, however, to see these two attitudes as mutually exclusive or to compare the merits of the two women. Service and listening, he said, are twin dimensions of hospitality. He argued this is a dimension of the Christian life that we need to recover today, both as a value for individuals and communities and as a prophetic sign for our times. The Pope pointing out that summer is a good moment to push for this and experience the beauty of our relationship with God and how it can help us be more open to others. In other news this morning, Tulsi Gabbard is pointing to the former President Obama and his administration and saying they could be guilty of treason, claiming they withheld intelligence on Russian interference in the 2016 election. In an interview with Fox News' Sunday Morning Futures, Gabbard alleged this was part of an effort to harm the current president, Donald Trump.
They decided that they would do everything possible to try to undermine his ability to do what voters tasked President Trump to do.
She said accountability is needed.
Those responsible, no matter how powerful they are and were at that time, no matter who was involved in creating this treasonous conspiracy against the American people, they all must be held accountable.
The director of intelligence releasing declassified documents on Friday that she says were evidence of the Obama administration's manufactured and politicized intelligence to lay the groundwork for the FBI probe into alleged Russia election interference, which was proven to be false. Border Enforcement Director Tom Homan and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem are expected to visit a hospitalized Border Patrol officer today after he was shot by an illegal immigrant in Manhattan over the weekend. Frank Russo is from the Department of Homeland Security and calls the Border Patrol officer a hero.
He did exactly what we ask of all of our officers under the circumstances. He executed our mission, which is to protect the country.
The New York Police Department says Miguel Francesco Nunez shot the Border Patrol officer who returned fire during an apparent botched robbery. He had been wanted for numerous crimes in New York. President Trump says he was apprehended at the border after coming in illegally in 2023, but instead of being deported, was released. There are reports President Trump could visit China on his way to the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in South Korea later this year or meet with China's president on the sidelines of the event. Laura Westbrook says that's according to the South China Morning Post, which cites several sources.
Earlier this month, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio had their first face-to-face meeting. This was seen as an important step towards Presidents Donald Trump and Xi Jinping meeting.
After the meeting, Rubio said there is a strong desire on both sides for a meeting between the presidents. The report comes as the two countries try to negotiate an end to their trade war. The APEC summit will take place from October 30th to November 1st. And the Cram Fire in Central Oregon is the country's biggest wildfire this year, with nearly 100,000 acres now burned. Several homes have been destroyed in a sparsely populated area that's about 130 miles southeast of Portland. But hundreds of other structures are at risk. As of Sunday, it was 49% contained. More than 900 firefighters are involved in battling that blaze. And Daniel Martindale tells us a driver accused of intentionally plowing into a crowd of 36 people in East Hollywood over the weekend on Saturday morning has a violent criminal history.
Fernando Ramirez was convicted of a hate crime in 2019, but the conviction was later overturned by an appeals court. In that incident, he allegedly sucker-punched a black Whole Foods employee in Laguna Beach. In a recorded conversation, Ramirez can be heard telling a police officer he did it because he hated all black people. Records show prosecutors in Orange County have filed 11 criminal charges against Ramirez in the past 11 years. Ramirez was also on parole. Police say he intentionally drove into the crowd shortly after being thrown out of the Vermont Hollywood nightclub. I'm Daniel Martindale.
Officials in Texas say 3 people are still missing after catastrophic flooding near San Antonio. Officials in Kirk County say many of the 100 people reported missing have been found and are confirmed safe, but there are still those who are unaccounted for. County officials say search and recovery efforts will continue along the Guadalupe River. And multiple thunderstorms this week could bring flash flooding, meanwhile, to the Midwest and the East Coast, while elsewhere, as we mentioned in the weather earlier, a heat dome could send temps soaring into the triple digits. Today, the flooding risk is greatest across Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia. Meanwhile, places such as Kansas City and Dallas could see 100 degrees or upwards of that. An AccuWeather meteorologist saying the heat wave could be sticking around for a while, thanks to dry weather and very limited rainfall in other places such as Kansas and Nebraska. Jeffrey Epstein's former attorney says there's probably not much to be found about his late client's dealings with the rich and powerful in grand jury transcripts that the White House wants unsealed. Alan Dershowitz telling Fox News Sunday that the information people want to see is more likely in records that have been sealed by federal judges in New York City.
The information that hasn't been requested is going to be far more informative and far more relevant than the grand jury information.
Epstein passing away in jail in 2019 while awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges. He was accused of sexually abusing young girls, and rumors have been swirling nonstop about who else was involved in his crimes. President Trump last week ordered the Attorney General to get the grand jury testimony unsealed after an uproar from some of his biggest supporters when Bondi said there was no so-called client list to release. Dershowitz says he thinks former Epstein's associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, knows everything about everyone involved. She's serving, meanwhile, 20 years for Epstein-related crimes, and Dershowitz said she'll likely be willing to spill the tea if she were granted immunity. Mark Mayfield tells us data tech company Astronomer says its CEO has now resigned after being caught on the kiss cam at a recent Coldplay concert in Massachusetts.
In a post on social media Saturday, the company said Andy Byron has tendered his resignation and the board of directors has accepted. Astronomer said its board will now start the search for Byron's replacement as co-founder and chief product officer Pete DeJoy continues to serve as interim CEO. More than 76 million people have viewed the now viral video of the kiss cam incident at Gillette Stadium. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Alaska Airlines resuming operations after requesting a ground stop late yesterday for all flights on what it called an IT outage. This passenger is among the many impacted.
They were like, oh, there's going to be a slight delay. We're checking out. There's like something wrong. And we were about on the plane for like 2 hours. Everyone was really nice about it, but it was like 2 hours. And then they said, hey, it's just not going to happen tonight.
The ground stop affecting more than 200 planes. Regional subsidiary Horizon Air requested a ground stop as well. That has now been lifted. And a new survey says dual-income couples with no children are going into debt for their pets. The survey found that 94% of these couples view their pets as family. 68% of these pet parents saying they have made financial sacrifices to cover pet essentials. The couple surveyed spending an average of almost, $2,000 a year on their pets. Only 11% of those surveyed said they don't splurge on their pets. It is a Monday morning. We're so glad you're tuning in to EWTN's Catholic Connection. We're going to check out what's on the journey home with our friend Matt Swaim from the Journey Home and, of course, the Sunrise Morning Show. We'll be right back. 15 minutes past the hour. It is a Monday, July 21st. It's a Monday. That means, of course, the Journey Home is coming up on EWTN. And to get the scoop on it, I like the way we do this, Matt. We start out with you with the Journey Home, talking about what happens on a Monday night. And then we have Doug Keck to wrap up the week for us to talk about what's coming up in the weekend and the future days of EWTN nearby. So today we want to focus on the show or anything else you'd like to discuss. I had a fun conversation this morning, an interesting conversation, of course, on the Sunrise Morning Show. But let's start with the Journey Home, shall we? What's coming up?
Yeah, I'll just say what I said to Paul when, you and I, kind of discuss back and forth what are going to, Paul's the go-between who tells me what you want to talk about. And he says she wants to talk about Coldplay. I was like, oh, okay. What does she actually want to talk about? But it turned out it was...
Coldplay.
Yeah, well, there's some moral lessons to be extrapolated.
There are many.
There.
Yep.
But tonight on the journey home, I'm extremely excited about this one. This is one I was working on for a very long time. Dr. Matthew Levering is going to be on the show, and I don't know if you've read any of his works over the years. He's done a number of great things. He's taught at Mundelein Seminary. He's got just a powerful background and story, but the basic gist of it was he grew up in a Quaker household, but his family's affiliation with the Quaker movement had to do much more with kind of like as a more of a political activism kind of thing than a spirituality. I don't know if you know much about Quakers, but they tend
a
to be
little
kind of,
bit, because Dom is from Pennsylvania, and they're
Right.
very strong in that area, Hershey, Pennsylvania area.
Yeah, it tends to be more of like a politically
Yeah.
progressive, like
Yeah.
reform the social order kind of world. So the spirituality of it was not necessarily a big part of it. But what's interesting about that, Teresa, is it can be tempting sometimes when you hear about that sort of thing, when, you know, families are, you know, kind of involved in some big moral cause, but it doesn't have to be our cause. Is that he had instilled in him from a very young age that it's important to seek out what's right and try and, you know, kind of work for it
Right.
a little bit. And, you know, when that, of course, finally found itself the right thing to attach to in the Catholic faith, all the formation to do the right thing when you find it had already been part of his makeup. That was already sort of built into him. And it kind of goes back to what the Catechism tells us about conscience, that even if your conscience is formed badly, it's still kind of a messed up thing to violate it, because then when you do encounter the truth, you'll be able to dismiss it. So I'm always hopeful for people who have kind of like a conscience, even if they're way off base, because I feel like that person can be moved to the right thing if they find the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you're thinking about things, if you're reflecting, and I'm going to talk about this
right?
in my 2 cents segment next hour, then that eventually, I think, if you're honest with yourself, and you may not even, as you said, Matt, be seeking a spirituality, but we know all truth comes from God, and we have the fullness of truth in the faith, and if you are going along those lines, eventually you're going to sound Catholic. I mean, whether it's about the social teaching, whether it's about the life issues, whether it's about whatever it is. I mean, even someone, have you noticed Bill Maher, who disagrees with a lot of what the Catholic Church teaches, but at the same time has made a lot of common sense statements, and I think it's because he's a thinker. He is a thinker.
Well, let me tell you this. It is a lot easier to have a conversation with a guy like Bill Maher, who has said nasty things about the Catholic Church all day, but is somehow weirdly internally consistent with a lot of the stuff that he says. That conversation is going to be a lot easier to have than a conversation with somebody, and we all know him, who just doesn't care, right? Who's just like, oh, whatever, you do your thing, I'll do mine. That kind of person is really hard to convert, Teresa. You know?
It's really important to talk about this, though, when you're giving your testimony, because it shows the process and the thinking and the steps that people take to leading into the Catholic Church. And I think, to me, that is fascinating, that if you're really seeking truth, if and especially if you're coming at it from a Christian perspective, eventually you're going to end up Catholic. I don't know how you can't.
Well, this is where the science of conversion and the science of evangelization comes in, is because everybody's hungry for something. The world is starved for truth. It's starved for the Eucharist, if you want to, you know, be just plain and simple about it. But a lot of people don't realize that that's what they're hungry for. And so the question is, how do you connect the dots? Because the world, I think most of our friends and family know that they're starving for something, that the world is not like what it's supposed to be, and that the things that they think are supposed to make them happy aren't doing the trick.
Right.
So how do we help them get from point A to point B? How do we identify the hunger and help them, you know, put the breadcrumbs in the right order, right, to lead them to the banquet?
Well, that's why I think the Coldplay story has got so many dimensions, because it's dimensioned from a business perspective. I mean, even if you look at the church teachings on the workplace and what the church says about labor and about how to treat people in the workplace, there's so much there. And also, you and I were talking this morning on the Sunrise Morning Show about, you know, the world is, as you said earlier, whatever you want, your thing, you know, as long as it's consensual. And yet, as we said, okay, a lot of these people are just using it to make fun of people who got caught in a very serious situation, which is wreaking havoc in their own personal lives, right? But there's something there for people being outraged by what these people, you know, as they appeared in that video, in that clip from the concert, because deep down, I think people know there is a sense. And I think that is, even if they won't acknowledge it, the Holy Spirit working and the natural law working on their hearts. I just see that. And this is why we can use these examples for Catholic teaching.
Well, and to Dr. Levering's story, I sometimes in RCIA talk about this as the Aerosmith theology. If you've ever heard the song "Living on the Edge," it starts out, "There's something wrong with the world today. I don't know what it is. Something's wrong with our eyes." Right? I think that this is what a lot of people feel, and people look at that situation. The Coldplay situation. You name any thousands of the stories that hit the headlines. There's something wrong with the world. I'm not sure what it is, and yet. You go back straight to the book of Genesis, what we talked about this morning on our show.
Right.
The church understands the psychology of sin and how it works and how we react to it. Adam and Eve mess up. The first thing they do is hide. People get caught on the Coldplay kiss cam. What's the first thing they do
is hide.
And this is all... and then there's going to be, I'm sure, a cycle of blame, which is the same thing as the Garden of Eden. All this other stuff unfolds, and the church is like, yes, we knew... we got primo. This is how original sin entered the world. We know how sin works and what it does to people.
Right. And Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun.
Nothing.
We just see it played out differently because of the media and because of the high-tech culture in which we live. But it's very clear. And that's why these kinds of things, I think, are really important to stop and think and reflect. And this is what I love about the Journey Home, because you dive into the process in which people are involved before they make that final step to come into the church. And there is a process. It's a very, very detailed process. It's a thinking process. It's a reasoning process. Obviously, it's a discernment and prayer process, but the intelligence of a person comes in because they're looking at, well, wait a minute. What the church says this, and I've been feeling this for a really long time, and look at what the world is doing, yet the church has had this teaching for 2,000 years. You have to pray first, but then you have to think your way through things too.
Well, you got to do it all. It's all part of a package. And this is one of the things I love so much about Dr. Levering's story is that he's like a super well-respected and brilliant theologian, but the minds who actually got him to sort of shape his moral perspective in a Catholic way were authors of fiction like Dostoevsky and Walker Percy and some others to think about, well, how does a Christian tell a story? What's the moral vision of the world that a Christian author creates? And how is that different than maybe other worlds? What does that mean about what a human being is? And again, this is, at the end of the day, this is one of the questions that comes up anytime something hits the news. Well, what are we here for?
Right.
What am I? Who am I? What is my meaning? What am I here for? And these are the questions that the church has answers to.
And that's what I love about Pope Leo's homily yesterday, talking about reflection and using summertime as a great time to reflect, and referring, of course, to the Martha and Mary story. Not that what Martha was doing was bad, but that she wasn't fully present to the Lord because she was too much worried about the other details. And it was beautiful because he talked about you don't exclude Martha. It's not that she was doing anything poorly or that she was doing anything wrong. It's just that she needed to stop and first listen and be at the feet of Jesus and then go about the hospitality. And Dominic and I were talking about this in terms of the first reading of Abraham. Well, Abraham was taking care of so many different things at that time, getting his wife Sarah to bake the bread, getting the servant to get the meat ready. He's making sure that the feet are clean of his guests. But what he was fully present to his guests. And I think that's a challenge. It's a challenge, and that's why it's so great to hear testimonies of people who are challenged and think through the process. Matt,
you're
going to
love tonight's show.
I can't wait. Journey Home, of course, our very own Matt Swaim from the Sunrise Morning Show and the Journey Home, and of course the Coming Home Network. And he fits it all on one business card. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. We are your pro-life radio and TV network, and of course all of our resources online. Thanks for tuning in on a Monday. Always great to talk with our friend Michael New, assistant professor of practice at the Bush School of Business at Catholic U, and a senior associate scholar at the wonderful Charlotte Lozier Institute, the research arm of Susan B. Anthony. Do such great work in terms of keeping us up to date on all things life. So, Michael, it's so sad. I know Catholic News Agency had a report on this as well. This story out of Europe, when you look at these countries who were once so very, very Catholic, showing such an increase in abortion. Let's talk about your story, which actually was just posted a few days ago, last week on nationalreview.com. New data shows abortion rate increases overseas. Thanks for joining us. Tell us, take a look at the numbers for us, if you would.
Yeah, sure. We got some new data from some countries overseas on their abortion rates, and sadly, the news is not good. That Ireland released data for 2024. We see that abortions are going up by about 8% in Ireland. England and Wales released data from the year 2022. Abortions went up by about 13% in England. So sadly, we do see a trend of increasing abortion numbers in the United States, sadly, and overseas as well. I think the main lesson to draw from this is that public policy choices do matter, and that when you make abortion policy more permissive, should become as no surprise, abortion numbers go up. Ireland repealed the Eighth Amendment back in 2018. They formally legalized abortion in 2019, and abortion numbers have shot up 60% since then. So, been a big surge in abortion in Ireland once they legalized. England, they pursued a policy similar to the U.S. They made chemical abortions much more easy to access. As of 2020, one could get these dangerous chemical abortion pills without any in-person visits. Again, they could be done through telehealth. Parliament made this policy permanent in 2022. So, it's no surprising in England, numbers are going up. So policy matters. Legalize abortion, make chemical abortion pills easier to get. Abortion numbers go up.
Do you see a connection in your research between what's happening both in Ireland and in England, a drop in Catholic faith, even though actually in Great Britain there are many people coming into the church? Overall, the sense in Europe is that there's still a struggle and that the Catholic Church is really being impacted, and not in a good way, between a lack of faith or decreased faith and these type of policy changes. Because if people are voting a certain way, and there are so many Catholics in these nations, and obviously they're failed to practice their faith or maybe understand or embrace it fully, do you see a connection with that?
Yeah, sadly, I do. One thing we just know from research on public opinion on abortion is one of the best predictors of opinion on abortion isn't necessarily religion, but church attendance. Whether or not someone ascribes to a certain faith doesn't necessarily tell you that much about them, but if they attend church or if they attend Mass consistently, there's a very, very good chance they're pro-life. Tragically, Mass attendance in Ireland has fell pretty dramatically. I think that was correlated with a decrease in pro-life sentiment. So I think certainly that's played a role in some of the policy choices that have happened and the rising abortion numbers that have followed.
In terms of the pro-life efforts there, I know that I would interview quite frequently leaders from Ireland at the March for Life in D.C., and they seem to have a pretty strong pro-life community. Has that changed as well, do you think?
I'm impressed with the Irish pro-lifers that I have met. You have a group called Youth Defense that seems very lively and very active on social media. I think that, keep in mind that, abortion has been a salient issue in Ireland for a long time. 2018 was not the first time they tried to liberalize the country's abortion laws. So, pro-life people in Ireland, are organized. They did a march recently. They're not giving up. I am hoping that the increase in abortions, will give people in Ireland some pause. Usually when abortion is legalized, proponents try to say this is for unique circumstances like rape or incest or a severe fetal defect, and then numbers just skyrocket. And
right.
I would just hope that gives some people some pause, that a lot of these abortions, a very high percentage, are elective. A lot of these pregnancies, a vast majority, could be carried safely to term. And I just hope that maybe that'll prick some people's consciences and you'll see some better laws put in place.
COVID seemed to have a big impact on this. You say in your article, then during the COVID pandemic in 2020, the FDA allowing women to obtain chemical abortions, and this is in the United States, without an in-person medical exam. The long-term trend in declining abortion rates abruptly reversed itself between 2017 and 2024. The number of abortions performed in the U.S. has increased by more than 21%, according to the Guttmacher Institute information. Overall, preventing chemical abortions remains an important challenge for pro-lifers both in the U.S. and around the world. So similar situations developed overseas during COVID, but let's talk about the United States. Let's bring it back to the States, as you mentioned, talking about the impact of COVID. Tell us more about that, if you would, Michael.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Prior to COVID, if a woman wanted to obtain a chemical abortion pill, she had to go to a abortion facility in person and have an in-person medical exam. She just couldn't get a pill shipped through the mail. She had to have an in-person exam and at least probably take one of the abortion pills in the presence of a medical professional. With COVID, that changed. The FDA changed the rules and said that women can now get these abortion pills through telehealth, where there is no in-person exam. And I think this is obviously fatal to unborn children, but terrible public health as well. I mean, if a woman has an ectopic pregnancy and obtains chemical abortion, that can be fatal. If she's further along in gestation, she realizes, has a chemical abortion, that can have negative, serious health consequences. So the FDA changed these rules during the pandemic. Women can get these abortions through telehealth. Then the Biden administration comes in January 2021, and the Biden administration FDA just continues this policy. That the Biden administration was very much in the pocket of the abortion industry. They maintained and kept this, I think, extremely unwise policy. Now we have President Trump in office. We have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at HHS. They can change this. The FDA can put safeguards in place, that would limit these chemical abortion drugs. We hope and pray that they do. We know they're reviewing, the policies and the safety. We just hope and pray they make a good decision.
So similar things took place, unfortunately, also overseas, right, during COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing in England. They allowed women to obtain chemical abortion pills without an in-person exam in 2020. And sadly, Parliament made this policy permanent in 2022. So that was actually an act of Parliament that took place there. So, we're not the only country that, liberalized rules on chemical abortions. We're not the only country with very permissive policies regarding chemical abortions. Other countries overseas did similar unwise things, and sadly, abortion numbers are going up in a lot of places because of that.
Yeah, it's just out of control. I mean, both in the United States with chemical abortions and also overseas. And I'm thinking maybe, and we could talk about this when we come back for our second segment, we do know that in the UK, they were among the first to reverse course, at least temporarily, on the whole so-called transitioning surgeries of young people. I mean, they were pushing forward with that like crazy. And then they stopped them. Then they stopped, of course, the prescription for these puberty blockers, and also because there were whistleblowers who were talking about the problems they saw where they weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing in terms of really sitting down with these young people and doing a real good psychological exam to find out what was going on. Maybe there was some other reason for them wanting, to go through and think that they're going to be a boy versus a girl or a girl versus a boy, and that would solve their problems. So that was one thing. Then they saw the negative fallout medically from these prescriptions. So in one area, their eyes are open, but in this area of abortion, it seems to be getting worse. We'll talk more with Michael New when we come back. It is a Monday morning. We appreciate your listenership, and we appreciate the great work of our guest, Michael J. New, Assistant Professor of Practice at the Bush School of Business at Catholic U and a Senior Associate Scholar at the Charlotte Lozier Institute. We'll be right back. Hope you're having a beautiful Monday. You're listening to EWTN's Catholic Connection on a Monday morning, July 21st. Appreciate the great work of our friend, Michael New. And you can find him in a number of places, including National Review Online. He's a regular guest of Catholic Connection and many other programs here on the network. He's an assistant professor of practice at the Bush School of Business at Catholic U, and also a senior associate at the amazing Charlotte Lozier Institute. That is a great place to go for research on all things life, the Charlotte Lozier Institute. So, Michael, I was talking before the break, we were talking about Great Britain, and they at least had some common sense and started to look at the issue of this whole transgender ideology as problematic. And there was a whole big study that came out on this in Great Britain that basically shut down many of these places. Do you think that maybe at some point there'll be eyes opened there regarding the fallout from abortion, especially chemical abortions, and the many problems that women are having?
I can hope and pray that's the case. I mean, I do give, the British government credit for the decisions they made on transgender policies. Right. A lot of bad policy choices have been made without much in the way of good research. And when the good research did come out, thankfully, the British government followed the advice they were given and put an end to a lot of this. So, it's harder to say that when it comes to abortion research, there's a lot of pushback. There's a lot of places have a vested interest financially in keeping abortion legal. The good research that shows that abortion does cause mental and physical health problems is often covered up, doesn't get the attention it deserves. It's a long ball game for us, but I'm hopeful that things can and do change for the better. So what happened in Britain is in fact a sign of hope.
All right, another sign of hope, the defunding of Planned Parenthood, even though it's only for a year. Your thoughts on that? Because there was a lot of mixed emotion and reaction in the pro-life community, as you well know. Although we were very glad that Planned Parenthood is going to be defunded for a year, we were shooting for 10 years, and that got changed. But what are you seeing so far? I was talking with one of our execs at EWTN Radio, Tom Price, who's from the Cincinnati area, and you were mentioning this during the break, that they had at least 2 facilities in Ohio, including a big one in Cincinnati, saying they're going to shut down.
Yep, that is correct. That right after defunding, Planned Parenthood announced the closure of 2 facilities in Ohio. Even prior to defunding, that they closed 8 facilities in Minnesota and Iowa. Here, even in D.C., they've cut their hours back at least a little bit. They're not open every Sunday, but only, I think, every other Sunday. So it is having an impact. I think that they realize moving forward they can't really count on federal revenue streams. I wish the funding was longer, but 1 year does show that Republican Congresses are willing to do this, and they know if they can't count on federal revenue, that's going to affect their planning moving forward. So I think you will see more facility closures in the future. It was a big victory. I mean, keep in mind, pro-lifers have wanted this for a long time. Republicans wouldn't touch this issue in the 90s. I mean, Republicans took control of Congress in 1994. A lot of pro-life people were excited. Defunding Planned Parenthood was just not even on the agenda back then. It didn't take us till the 2010s, but, the good investigative work of Lila Rose and David Lyden exposed a lot of misconduct. Now, by and large, the entire Republican Party is on board with this idea. We did get that budget through that defunded Planned Parenthood. So it wasn't everything we wanted, but it is a real win. And I think a win that pro-lifers should certainly celebrate.
$800,000, that's almost $1 billion. And you would think, given all the money that they had, or then that they raise on their own and the donations that they get, that they would, I'm glad that these places are shutting down, obviously, but what the heck are they doing with all their money?
Well, one thing I've always said is, big abortion needs big government. That they really do need government subsidies to really prop them up. They're very aggressive about government grants. They're very aggressive about trying to get, Medicaid funds. And a lot of this does prop up abortion. That even when they get reimbursed for things that are not directly abortion-related, money is fungible. So any Medicaid money they do get, at least indirectly, funds abortion. So, they have costs and expenses like anyone else. I do know that insurance rates at abortion facilities tend to be quite high. That they also need things like malpractice insurance that as we're well aware, things often go wrong. So running an abortion business has costs. They need the government to subsidize those costs. When those subsidies disappear, you're going to see places closed, and we're seeing that happening right now.
Well, the New York Times, of all places, I still can't figure that one out, but hey, I'll give them credit when credit is due. They did a big report earlier this year on all the problems at different facilities and all the poor conditions, how employees were complaining, not only complaining about low pay, but also about how they didn't have the proper equipment, how women were put in harm's way. These were people inside Planned Parenthood. So again, it's like they're getting all this money, almost $1 billion, or they were, at least it'll be suspended now for a year, and they get donations like crazy. Of course, they're on, Hollywood's A-list, also many leftist politicians. And so it seems to me that there needs to be more of an investigation as to what they're doing with their money.
No, absolutely. I think that, an audit would certainly be a good idea, especially, in years past when they have gotten taxpayer dollars. I think that, there is evidence, that they have defrauded state Medicaid systems, and, they have, in fact, billed the government for either patients they didn't see or procedures that they didn't do. So, I think more oversight certainly is a good idea, hoping that happens.
All right, last question. We have about less than a minute left. Your thoughts, I always like to leave us with an action item. What can Catholics do going into the fall and, of course, the March for Life coming up in January? What can we do to make sure we keep this front and center in terms of the concerns over the pro-life issues?
Well, there's going to be a ballot question in Virginia. If any of your listeners are in that area, people in Virginia certainly need help pushing back against that. That would put legal abortion in the state constitution. Most important thing, we're in this for the long haul. We're going to have our ups and downs. We're going to have setbacks. The most important thing is just be persistent in a culture of life. Give to pregnancy help centers. Make sure you're voting for pro-life candidates. I run a pro-life sidewalk ministry outside the D.C. Planned Parenthood. Support a 40 It's Your Life campaign. Pray outside an abortion facility. We're not going to win this overnight, but the good efforts of pro-lifers everywhere do add up and do save lives.
Yeah, I love your mention of the sidewalk advocates and also, of course, the pregnancy resource centers, which are just huge in terms of the great work they do. And my prayer is that we'll start seeing more coverage of the pregnancy resource centers and their great work. Michael, thank you. Always great to catch up. Enjoy the rest of your summer. Michael New, Assistant Professor of Practice at the Bush School of Business at the Catholic University of America and a Senior Associate at the wonderful Charlotte Lozier Institute. You can find his great work many places, including National Review. It is 46 minutes past the hour. It is time for our beautiful Scripture Verse of the Week. Gail Buckley is with us from Catholic Scripture Study International. Gail, great choice on this verse. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Yes. We don't use this book very often in my talks, but today's reflection comes from a small but a powerful verse in the book of Ecclesiastes in chapter 7, verse 14. And it says, in the day of prosperity, be joyful. And in the day of adversity, consider God has made the one as well as the other. It wouldn't be great if we had all had such a wise and balanced view of life. Mm-hmm. So often we divide our days into the good days and the bad days, and we celebrate when things go our way, and we question things, when God, or some people even blame God or, resent God when things go wrong. But this verse, I think, invites us to see both joy and sorrow and success and struggle as part of the mysterious plan of God. Let's start with the first part. In the day of prosperity, be joyful. Well, God's not opposed to our joy. In fact, He's the source of it. And when we are blessed with health and great families and finance and peace, we're encouraged to receive these gifts with, open hands and grateful hearts, and not to feel guilty about them, but to rejoice in them and to give glory to God. That's the thing a lot of times we forget to do, to give glory to God when things are going great. But when things, the second part, it says, in the day of adversity, consider what we should consider. Well, the verse continues, God has made the one as well as the other. And that's true. Adversity is allowed by God. It's not because He enjoys our pain, of course not, but because He's shaping us through it, just like with pruning a bush or something to make it grow thicker and better. Think of the lives of the people. And if prosperity, didn't spoil them, and I don't think adversity ever crushed them. So why? Because they were both, they saw both joy and sorrow coming from the loving hand of our God. Mm. And so I think this verse helps us to avoid two dangerous attitudes. Okay, one is entitlement. Believing that we deserve only good things. They were actually Christians. I've talked with some who think that, they think that way. They think that if things go wrong, they're surprised, thinking, what did I do to deserve this?
It's interesting you should bring that up. I don't know if you saw, there was an article. I'm always checking out some of the big Protestant websites just to see what's going on in general in the Christian world outside the church. And there is this pastor, I forget his name, but he's written a book on suffering. And it's making headlines all over the place in the Protestant world because it's not a topic with which they're used to dealing. Isn't that interesting?
They don't understand suffering. They don't understand when they suffer because so many of them are taught that Jesus took our suffering on the cross. And so therefore we don't have to suffer anymore, which is totally untrue. That's a really a contradiction, really. The other attitude is despair, and that's what happens a lot of times with these people that think that. They believe that the suffering, when they're suffering, that God's abandoned them because they don't understand. They don't understand why things are going wrong. And Ecclesiastes reminds us that God is even in the good, in the bad times. He's with us both through the good and the bad times. And it's really sad that some people are taught that. I'd love to know more about that book on suffering.
Yeah, I'll find the link. I was just looking at it the other day because I wanted to talk about it. But the thing is what's interesting about this pastor is that he's talking about how even though he struggled with this but he really did some research, and how the times that he went through, even though they were very rough, that's when he grew the most. And that's a very Catholic take.
Absolutely. Redemptive suffering. We believe in that. And it's so true because we have the truth, the fullness of truth. More importantly, I think this verse invites us to a deeper kind of trust. We don't understand why something is happening when we feel, that something's unfair or when our plans fall apart. We're invited to trust, and not in our circumstances, but in God's unchanging love. Mm-hmm. He is there with us all the time. So I think, whether we're in a season of prosperity or adversity, we need to remember that God is with us. He's made the one as well as the other, as this verse says. And we rejoice in those times to rejoice, and in those times that we go through suffering, we remember that, God the Father is in heaven is using both to shape our hearts.
Right, he allows it to happen. He's not going around zapping people, but he allows it to happen because we have free will, and he's not going to take the free will away from people. And sometimes our suffering is a result of bad choices. Not maybe it could be ours, but maybe even of other people. Gail, this is a great lesson. I love this verse. I love the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes.
I do too.
I think it's really worthwhile to read and to ponder. And again, the verse for today, jot it down, folks. Our scripture verse of the week is from the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 7, verse 14. In the day of prosperity, be joyful, and in the day of adversity, consider God has made the one as well as the other. Great advice, Gail. Always great to catch up with you and your wonderful work at Catholic Scripture Study International. Talk to you next Monday, God willing.
Amen.
Thanks, my dear. All right, we are about to take a break here, but let me let you know what's coming up. Well, I'll do that after the break. We have a little time. It is a Monday morning. Thanks for tuning in to Catholic Connection, an EWTN production. Hope your summer's going beautifully. July 21st already. We'll be right back. Looking forward to the second hour of Catholic Connection on EWTN's Radio Extra. Hope you are as well. We're going to have a great conversation with Dr. Kathleen Berchelmann. She is in studio with us this morning because she's making the round on our wonderful TV talk shows. And she is a pediatrician. She's a wife. She's a mother of 7 and co-founder of MyCatholicDoctor.com. She's commonly consulted by families desiring a faith-based approach to medicine. What a concept. So we'll talk with Kathleen in studio. But first, wait, there's more. As a Ginsu knife commercial used to say, we are going to talk about the importance of reflection based on the beautiful gospel and first reading yesterday for our Sunday Mass. We're going to take a look at what Pope Francis, well, may he rest in peace, Pope Leo, has said about that in his homily yesterday, but also a little treat for you. My spiritual director and pastor, Monsignor Michael Bulgarin, gave a beautiful homily on this, and it's really cool for him to talk about this because we call him Father Techie, Monsignor Techie, because he's so good at technology. I mean, he's really creative. He does a lot of creative things for our parish, but also he knows his own weakness in terms of always being on the phone and learning to control that. So we'll talk about that. We'll have a little clip from his homily yesterday at the 8 a.m. Mass at my parish, St. Joan of Arc in southeastern Michigan, within the Archdiocese of Detroit. And then, as I mentioned, so looking forward to chatting with Dr. Kathleen about the beauty of authentic Catholic healthcare. Again, she is here in studio with us, thanks be to God, to share her wisdom and her experience and her beautiful bedside manner with us this morning as she is ready to do some interviews here at EWTN Television. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. More Catholic Connection coming your way.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
It's the second hour of Catholic Connection on a Monday, July 21st here on EWTN Radio Extra. So happy you're tuning in. We have a great lineup as always, keeping you connected to what's happening in the church and the world. Right out of the gate after the weather and the news, of course, we are going to have T's 2 cents, and I'm sharing with you some pretty good 2 cents from my spiritual director and my pastor at our parish in the AOD, Archdiocese of Detroit, St. Joan of Arc Parish. I've been there for many, many years. My husband serves as a deacon there as well. And my pastor is Monsignor Michael Bulgarin, and he's a canon lawyer. He's brilliant. He also is great with technology. So his homily that he gave yesterday at the 8 and the noon mass, 8 a.m. and noon mass, were so important because this is someone who really is practicing what he preaches because he's so good with technology. He's got it all figured out. He does great things for us as parishioners. He puts out a fabulous e-blast every week with all kinds of great links, like to Jeff Cavins or to Father Michael Schmitz or to Bishop Barron. And he uses, of course, Formed and all these other great resources. And he's always teaching us about what's available online to learn more about our faith. He also knows that sometimes he can get consumed by this. And this is why I thought his homily was so good yesterday. It's really sometimes confusing because we look at that gospel about Martha and Mary, and we see Martha working so hard because she wants to prepare a beautiful meal for the Lord. But Mary is right away saying, okay, this is God. I need to hear what he has to say. The Pope made some beautiful comments as well about this, and we'll talk about both. But what I loved about what Monsignor had to say, and it's similar to what Pope Leo said, actually, kind of the same theme, it's not that what Martha was doing was bad, because that's part of hospitality, as we see in the first reading, right? But the difference between Abraham in the first reading and Martha was that Abraham was right away fully present to the people that showed up who ended up being angels, right? And there's some theologians who even say that could have been the Lord. He was there. Let me wash your feet. Let me get you something to drink. Let me prepare you a meal. He even bowed when the guests showed up. So there was a different kind of attitude, if you read and kind of study and pray about this, that Abraham had versus Martha. So we'll talk more a little bit about that. And I want to talk about the importance of reflection, what the Pope also addressed, saying that summertime is a great time to slow down and ponder. So much to discuss in 2 cents. And if you were listening in the first hour of the program, we also have a great guest coming up at the bottom of the hour. She's in studio with us this morning. Her name is Dr. Kathleen Berchelmann, and she is a wonderful Catholic physician. And she's talking about Catholic spirituality in medicine. She's doing a number of interviews with us here at EWTN, including right here on this very show. Let's take a look at the weather for a Monday morning. The National Weather Service says we have heat issues. I mean, big issues. Dangerous heat is expanding. So the heat, they say, will increase and expand across the Central Plains, the Mississippi Valley, southeast, and enter the eastern part of the country through the week as high pressure builds across the eastern two-thirds of the nation. On the northern edge of the heat, the threat for severe thunderstorms will also happen. Heavy rainfall across the northern plains and the upper Midwest through tomorrow. And then, of course, we know that we're seeing a lot of stories, and we'll also have this in the news, about critical fire weather out west. So that is your weather forecast on a Monday morning in the second hour of Catholic Connection. You are listening to EWTN's Radio Extra. We appreciate you. Let's get started with the news and see what's happening here on EWTN on a Monday. Well, amid continuing violence in the Holy Land, the Holy Father holding a telephone conversation this morning with the President of the State of Palestine. According to a statement released by the Holy See Press Office, the Pope receiving the call from President Abbas, during which they discussed recent developments in the conflict in the Gaza Strip and the violence that's occurring in the West Bank. In a statement from the Vatican during the phone call, the Holy Father repeated his appeal, they say, for international humanitarian law to be fully respected, emphasizing the particular obligation to protect civilians and sacred sites, also the prohibition of the indiscriminate use of force and of the forced transfer of the population. And more on this in our 2 cents segment this morning. Marking his third Sunday at the papal summer residence in Castel Gandolfo, the Pope, presiding over Mass for the 16th Sunday in Ordinary Time at the nearby Cathedral of Albano, reflecting upon the first reading and the Gospel, he said the passages call us to reflect on hospitality, service, and listening. The Pope first looking at the first reading from Genesis, where 3 men visit Abraham in the heat of the day, Pope Leo pointing out how Abraham's response to the visitors as master of the house was one of hospitality. Then turning to the gospel, the Pope commenting on how the passage teaches us about God's way of acting. Jesus comes as a guest in the house of Martha and Mary, not as a stranger, but as a friend during a celebration. Martha, he says, welcomes him by serving, while Mary sits at his feet to listen to him. Jesus responded, he said, to Martha's comments by inviting her to see the value of listening. Yet the Holy Father stressing it would be incorrect, however, to see these two attitudes as mutually exclusive or to compare the merits of the two women. Service and listening, he said, are twin dimensions of hospitality. He argued it's a dimension of the Christian life that we especially need to recover today, both as a value for individuals and communities and as a prophetic sign for our times. The Pope pointing out that summertime is a good moment to push for this and experience the beauty of our relationship with God and how it can help us be more open to others. Again, more on that coming up after the break in our 2 Cents segment. In other news this morning on a Monday, Tulsi Gabbard accusing former President Obama and his administration of treason, claiming they withheld intelligence on Russian interference in the 2016 election. In an interview with Fox News Sunday Morning Futures, Gabbard alleging this was part of an effort to harm President Trump.
They decided that they would do everything possible to try to undermine his ability to do what voters tasked President Trump to do.
And Gabbard also says accountability is definitely needed.
Those responsible, no matter how powerful they are and were at that time, no matter who was involved in creating this treasonous conspiracy against the American people, they all must be held accountable.
The director of national intelligence declassified documents on Friday that she said are evidence of the Obama administration's manufactured and politicized intelligence to lay the groundwork for the FBI probe into alleged Russia's election interference, which was proven to be false. Border Enforcement Director Tom Homan and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem are expected to visit a hospitalized Border Patrol officer today after he was shot by an illegal immigrant in Manhattan on Saturday. Frank Russo from the Department of Homeland Security calls the Border Patrol officer a hero.
He did exactly what we ask of all of our officers under the circumstances. He executed our mission, which is to protect the country.
The New York Police Department alleging Miguel Francisco Nunez shot the Border Patrol officer who returned fire during an apparent botched robbery. Nunez has been wanted for numerous crimes in New York. President Trump says he was apprehended at the border after coming in illegally in 2023, but instead of being deported, he was then released. There are reports that President Trump could visit China on his way to the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in South Korea later this year, or meet with China's president on the sidelines of the event. Laura Westbrook says that that's according to the South China Morning Post, which cites several different sources.
Earlier this month, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio had their first face-to-face meeting. This was seen as an important step towards Presidents Donald Trump and Xi Jinping meeting.
After the meeting, Rubio said there is a strong desire on both sides for a meeting between the presidents. The report comes as the two countries try to negotiate an end to their trade war, the APEC summit taking place in late October, October 30th to November 1st. Cramfire in Central Oregon, the country's biggest wildfire this year, with nearly 100,000 acres now burned. Several homes have been destroyed in a sparsely populated area about 130 miles southeast of Portland, but hundreds of other structures are still at risk. As of Sunday, it was 49% contained. More than 900 firefighters are involved in battling that blaze. Daniel Martindale tells us the driver accused of intentionally plowing into a crowd of 36 people in East Hollywood on Saturday morning has a violent history of crime.
Fernando Ramirez was convicted of a hate crime in 2019, but the conviction was later overturned by an appeals court. In that incident, he allegedly sucker-punched a black Whole Foods employee in Laguna Beach. In a recorded conversation, Ramirez can be heard telling a police officer he did it because he hated all black people. Records show prosecutors in Orange County have filed 11 criminal charges against Ramirez in the past 11 years. Ramirez was also on parole. Police say he intentionally drove into the crowd shortly after being thrown out of the Vermont Hollywood nightclub. I'm Daniel Martindale.
Officials in Texas say 3 people still missing after the catastrophic flooding near San Antonio. Officials in Kirk County say Many of the 100 people reported missing have been found and are confirmed to be safe, but there are still 3 unaccounted for. County officials say search and recovery efforts will continue along the Guadalupe River. Multiple thunderstorms, as we mentioned earlier in the weather this week, could bring flash flooding to the Midwest and the East Coast, while elsewhere a heat dome could send temps soaring into the triple digits. Today, the flood risk is greatest across Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia. Meanwhile, places such as Kansas City and Dallas could see upwards of 100 degrees. An AccuWeather meteorologist says a heat wave could be sticking around for a while, thanks to a drought and limited rainfall in places such as Kansas and Nebraska. Jeffrey Epstein's former attorney says probably not much to be found about his late client's dealings with the rich and powerful in grand jury transcripts at the White House, where the White House wants unsealed. But Alan Dershowitz also told Fox News Sunday the information people want to see is more likely in records that have been sealed by federal judges in New York City.
The information that hasn't been requested is going to be far more informative and far more relevant than the grand jury information.
Epstein died in jail in 2019 while awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges. He was accused of sexually abusing young girls, and rumors have been swirling nonstop about who else was involved in his crimes. President Trump last week ordering Attorney General Pam Bondi to get the grand jury testimony unsealed after an uproar from some of his biggest supporters when Bondi said there was no so-called client list. Dershowitz says he thinks former Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell knows everything about everyone involved. She's serving 20 years for Epstein-related crimes, and Dershowitz said she'd likely be willing to spill the beans if she were granted immunity. Mark Mayfield tells us data tech company Astronomer says its CEO has stepped down after being caught on the kiss cam at a recent Coldplay concert in Massachusetts.
In a post on social media Saturday, the company said Andy Byron has tendered his resignation and the board of directors has accepted. Astronomer said its board will now start the search for Byron's replacement as co-founder and chief product officer Pete DeJoy continues to serve as interim CEO. More than 76 million people have viewed the now viral video of the kiss cam incident at Gillette Stadium. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Alaska Airlines resuming operations after requesting a ground stop late yesterday for all flights over what it called a technical outage. This passenger is among the many impacted.
They were like, oh, there's going to be a slight delay. We're checking out. There's like something wrong. And we were about on the plane for like 2 hours. Everyone was really nice about it, but it was like 2 hours. And then they said, hey, it's just not going to happen tonight.
The ground stop affecting more than 200 planes. Regional subsidiary Horizon Air requesting a ground stop as well. That has now been lifted. And Microsoft finally this morning warning of active attacks against SharePoint servers used by governments and businesses around the globe. The attacks were discovered over the weekend and are using a previously unknown vulnerability in the software. It allows attackers to bypass two-factor authentication to get access to the systems. The FBI says it's on the case, working to mitigate the threat. It's a Monday morning. We need more time for reflection. We will address this here at the Holy Father and some other wonderful church leaders have to say about it. Stay tuned. You're listening to EWTN's Radio Extra on a Monday. Summertime should be a time, at least partially. I know we can't stop working, but we need to slow down. So says the Holy Father. Yes, indeed. He talked about that yesterday in his beautiful homily and also his Angelus reflection. He said a dimension of the Christian life that we particularly need to recover today is reflection and slowing down, both as a value for individuals and communities and as a prophetic sign for our times. The Pope pointing out that summer is a good moment to push for this and experience the beauty of our relationship with God and how it can help us to be more open to others. And it can be a little bit challenging sometimes, and Deacon Dominic and I were talking about this. You have the first reading with Abraham when the three visitors come, and he's very, very busy. He's all about making sure they are treated not just properly, but very well, making sure they get the best meat, the best animal from his farm, and to make sure it's prepared properly. Sarah's making fresh bread. He's giving them water, washing their feet. And then we see Martha doing something very similar in the gospel when Jesus comes to visit, and she's, getting the dinner ready, but then she's getting a little bit upset because she thinks her sister is being lazy and just sitting there, where we learn that Jesus is saying, well, Mary has chosen the better part. He's not scolding Martha per se. It's not that he was saying you shouldn't be worried about preparing a meal and being hospitable. But what I loved about my pastor's homily yesterday was it was talking about, and of course what the Holy Father had to say, being in the moment, being present, fully present, which Abraham was. Everything is about his guests. He was totally present and in that moment, bowing to them, realizing he had to be the best he could and provide the best for them. Whereas Martha was a little bit annoyed about her activities. Not that what she was doing was bad. And as the Pope said, it's not mutually exclusive. But that we have to take the time first and foremost to slow down and to reflect. And as I was saying in introducing this segment, this part of the homily that my pastor gave at the 8 a.m. and New Mass yesterday at our parish in southeastern Michigan, it's good for him to talk about this because he really does practice what he preaches. He is so technologically advanced. He's so good at giving us all this great information, great resources on how to really learn more about our faith. Every week he puts out such a really cool newsletter that's got great links and great details and different programs in which we can get involved. So he really wants to make sure we have the resources and take advantage of technology. But he also knows that all of us can get caught up in this. And here's a portion of his homily yesterday based on the beautiful gospel of Martha and Mary, and of course that first reading about Abraham serving the guests. Here we go.
I think many of us have become professionals at multitasking. We multitask everything we do. And even on my family's Zoom calls that we do, probably more than I want to, my mom or one of my sisters will look and say, all right, what are you looking at? What are you looking at on your computer? And it's like, well, I was just trying to do a little bit of work. We love to multitask, but that also means that we're not often present. Remember when the seminary first asked the seminarians no longer bring their phones to the chapel. I thought, well, that's stupid. I said, I do all my prayers. Everything I do is on my phone. But I will also admit to the fact that I could be in our chapel and all of a sudden, let me check that news feed. Let me check, that was a text that just came by. Let me check that out. Oh, I just got an email. And all of a sudden my prayer time means that I'm not always present. Today's readings, especially the first reading in our gospel, while it also has to do about hospitality, it's also about being present. Think about Abraham. Here Abraham is just sitting near his tent, and he sees 3 visitors. He doesn't even know who these 3 visitors are. And yet he stops everything. And what does he do? He greets them. He gets water to have their feet washed. He gets bread, asks Sarah to make the best meal. He goes out and makes provisions for, again, the best meal that could possibly had for these 3 complete strangers. Abraham was totally present to those strangers. He stopped everything he did. He wasn't multitasking. And little did he know that the stranger in his midst was God himself. And it was God who tells Abraham, next year this time when I come and visit it, you will bear a son. They're amazed. Abraham was totally present and had the ability to listen and to see what the Lord was calling him to do, and offered extremely awesome hospitality. Then in today's gospel, we have Martha and Mary. Martha, who wasn't necessarily present to the Lord because she was too busy multitasking, whereas Mary was totally present. Oh, Mary, I'm sure, would have helped, but she recognized the greatness of Christ in her midst. She knew that she had to sit and listen to soak in his wisdom. She knew She couldn't and shouldn't multitask because of the Messiah that was in her midst. Knowing that the Messiah was in her midst changed her world. Now Martha, she's too busy. She's worried about, getting everything ready, and she's probably dropping some money. Yeah, I'm listening, Lord. Yeah, Yeah, right, she's listening. And she goes back to preparing the meal. And it's interesting, at a certain point, she gets kind of grumbly. She looks at the Lord and said, would you tell my sister to get in here into the kitchen? I need some help. Jesus would have been left alone. And what does Jesus say? Martha, 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 you are worried and anxious about many things. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken from her. The Lord, in essence, is saying, Mary's present to me, and you're not. And this task that you have to worry about, this meal, it'll come with time. But Mary has chosen the better part of being present, and again, it will not be taken from her. Our brothers and sisters, we live in a day and an age in a world where we love to multitask, but we're also not totally present to people around us. And sometimes we're not present to God Himself. Think about your relationships with people. When you're on the phone or when you're doing FaceTime or a Zoom, are you totally present to the people that are in that meeting? Oh, it's very tempting, believe me, to get some extra things done. But it means you're not totally present.
So important. We need to be totally present before the Lord. And so it's not a bad thing that Martha was concerned about the meal, but her heart wasn't totally in what the Lord had to say, and that's where we learn, and that's where we grow. Scripture is full of references to the importance of slowing down, listening, and reflecting. In Proverbs 15:28, the heart of the righteous ponders how to answer. And of course, our Blessed Mother is the greatest example, I believe, in Scripture that we have of someone who pondered and reflected. Luke 2, verse 19, and Mary treasured up all these things, pondering them in her heart. Okay? Psalm 77:12, I will reflect on all you have done and ponder your mighty deeds. When we sit before the Lord, it forces us to listen to what He has to say to us. Psalm 119:15, I will meditate on your affirmations and fix my eyes on your ways. And one of my favorite verses, Psalm 46:10. And it kind of reminds me of Il dolce far niente, the sweetness of doing nothing. Be still and know that I am God. Are we doing that? Are we still? Even in the summertime, we can be busy with trying to get things done around the house and do projects and whatnot. First thing we need to do is to be still and to know that He is God and we are not. Psalm 46:10. Reflection, a good thing. Service, yes, but sitting at the Lord's feet first. Be still and know that He is God. We'll be right back. Hope you're doing well, having a beautiful Monday. Slowing down a bit, Dr. Kathleen Berchelmann is talking about healthcare providers and Catholic spirituality, a Catholic perspective on healthcare. She's going to be with Jim and Joy Pinto. At Home with Jim and Joy is a great show. I love those two. They are, as the kids would say, totes adorbs. They're just wonderful. They have a great program, do so much for the pro-life movement. And Kathleen, we're so grateful that you came in studio this morning. So what are the points, tell us, that you hope to share with our good friends, Jim and Joy Pinto? Let's start with that, because you really have a very unique ministry in the fact that you're a pediatrician, you're a mom of 7, you started My Catholic Doctor, and so you're very much helping people understand the connection between medicine and our faith. Let's start with what you're going to discuss on the program, as far as you know, this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Our message is that Catholic healthcare in America is still present, it's strong, it's growing, and it's because it is a ministry of Jesus Christ, right? We're not reinventing the wheel here. We're not doing anything new. At My Catholic Doctor, we're continuing a 2,000-year healing ministry of Jesus Christ. And since Jesus Christ started Catholic healthcare, there have been 3 primary ministries of our church, right? They are sacraments, education, and healthcare. And in the last 60 years, American healthcare has been largely secularized. People have tried to remove faith in healing from healthcare, but that's not what Jesus Christ said, right? He said in Luke chapter 10, verse 9, this is our mission statement at My Catholic Doctor. Jesus Christ said, "Cure the sick who are there, and say to them, the kingdom of God has come near to you." Right? So Jesus Christ, in his message, in his call to the healing ministry, gave us 2 commands. One is, it's not just to cure the sick, right? That was number 1. But he said 2 things in one sentence. He also told us to tell the sick that the kingdom of God has come near to you. And boy, that's pretty much not allowed in most employed healthcare settings in America. And so we're here to allow people who have been called by Jesus Christ to the healing ministry to answer that call, to give their fiat, to say yes.
There's so much research on the benefit, and I don't have to tell you this, you know this because of your great work, on the benefit of having a faith and having a prayer and thinking outside yourself. I mean, physically, emotionally, people of faith are happier, they're more settled, they find joy because it's not just all about them. And so you would think with all the research out there, connecting prayer, connecting faith to our spiritual health, which does affect our spiritual and psychological health, which does affect our physical health, you would think that the medical community would have been more open to this. Why do you think we started to go down this path where we are today, as you pointed out, where there's so much, there's a lot going on that's good, as you mentioned in the beginning of your comments, but there's also a lot of challenges still, Doctor, against people who want to talk about God and medicine.
I think we could do a whole 1-hour show on what happened to American Catholic healthcare, because it was only 60 years ago, we had Catholic healthcare was most of America's healthcare, and we had the Eucharist and a monstrance with altar boys coming down the halls of our Catholic hospitals every day, right? And boy, that disappeared. And what happened in 60 years? Well, I think that there's the short answer to this is there's 2 things. One is what I call the hot button issues: abortion, contraception, euthanasia, medication assistance in dying, transgender, et cetera, et cetera. And those are very important issues, and they've definitely played a role in the secularization of American healthcare. But the second reason, and I think the under-discussed reason, is that American healthcare became big business. That the little people, it's very, very hard to survive in America as an independent physician, Catholic or not. Any independent physician gets paid a half to a third of what major health systems get paid for the same service, and most Americans don't know that. Right. So if I go to United Healthcare or Aetna or Cigna or a major payer as a small practice, 1, 2, 3 providers, I'm going to get rates that are much, much lower than what a big, huge health system can get from the same payer for the same service, because the big, huge health system can bully the payer and say, they'll say, we are 40% of the market share in this county. If you don't give us this high rate, we're just going to pull out. Right. And the little guy can't do that. So this means that American healthcare has become bigger and bigger and bigger, and these big, huge conglomerates have bought out our Catholic hospitals. Anybody who's the minority share in healthcare gets bought out. So they've bought out independent practices, they've bought out our Catholic hospitals, and this is largely why we've been secularized. And then even if you're a good and faithful Catholic healthcare provider, and you're employed by one of these major health systems, most of the time you can still pretty much be a good and faithful healthcare provider. There are terrible, terrible cases of, being forced to, participate in abortion and transgender surgeries, et cetera.
Right.
But the biggest issue is that the more common issue is that the employed clinician is now wearing the handcuffs of that employer. And there's a limit to that doctor-patient relationship. They're pushed to see a certain number of people in a certain time frame. They are pushed to offer certain tests and not offer others. They're pushed to offer certain brands of vaccines, et cetera, right? Certain views aren't accepted. They get fired if they hold certain views. And so that doctor-patient relationship is really impaired because there's this third party called the employer, right? And there's another party called the insurance company. And really the doctor-patient relationship should only have one third party, which is the Holy Spirit.
So how long have you had My Catholic Doctor in place? When did you start it?
We opened clinically in 2019, just before COVID.
Wow. Talk about timing, right? Well, let's talk a little bit about how this works in terms of what My Catholic Doctor offers. I know you'll go into a lot of detail on Jim and Joy's show, but at Home with Jim and Joy. But what can people find? Because I'm on the website right now. It says faithful healthcare you can trust. What does that mean?
We do about 93% of medical concerns we can address. And we are 90% telehealth, 10% in-person care as of 2024. That's our close of 2024 stats. So we are a full-service health system. We're a clinically integrated network of independent providers. And whatever specialty you're looking for, mental health, OBGYN, primary care, dermatology, endocrinology, we have it.
So you have a list of different doctors, and can they? What if you're not in the state where these doctors are located? Can you help them find a doctor, a Catholic doctor near them?
Sure. So we're much more than a listing. Many people think we're just a listing, but we are actually a clinically integrated network. So we're doing so we can accept all major insurance plans, et cetera. We allow our independent clinicians to practice independently with the full voice of their faith and with the economy of scale they need to survive in America's current the financial marketplace of American healthcare. So to answer your question, if you're looking for a Catholic dermatologist in Nebraska, the answer is yes, we have a Catholic dermatologist. I'd be happy to see you, but it's going to be over telehealth. So most of our clinicians use multi-state licensing, so they are located in one state, but they may be licensed, such as I am, in more than 40 states. And then we're rendering our services over telehealth. And in this manner, we're able to expand access to faithful Catholic healthcare, especially our fertility care services.
Let's talk more about that when we continue our conversation with Dr. Kathleen Berchelmann, who is in town in Irondale, down in studios in Alabama. She's going to be on Jim and Joy today. We're going to be continuing our conversation on Catholic healthcare providers. Of course, mycatholicdoctor.com. Check out her great work and her partners there. We'll be right back. Check out the great work of My Catholic Doctor at mycatholicdoctor.com. Dr. Kathleen Berchelmann is in studio with us, pediatrician, a mom of 7, and dedicated to full health care, especially the connection between the Catholic faith and our health, the dignity of the human person. So we were chatting during the break, Doctor, about this push in so many different levels and areas of our culture in the medical field, but even beyond in terms of messaging and whatnot. When it comes to death, trying to end it before it is necessary and pressuring people to do so. You're involved in something called the Holy Death Initiative. Let's start with that. What's that about?
The Holy Death Initiative is one of our pro-life initiatives at the My Catholic Doctor Foundation, which attempts to meet people where they are in the suffering of the death process and help them die a holy death. The evil one wants that last temptation. He wants that the final moments before death. The evil one is right there, still trying to steal your soul, and we've known this for 2,000 years. And in a modern American healthcare, the push for euthanasia, now often called medication assistance in dying, or MAID, there's this huge push for it. And in some states that's legal, which is terrible, but in other states, even if it's not terminal sedation or medication assistance in dying or euthanasia, there's something very close to that happens all the time. And we're here at My Catholic Doctor. We can do a telehealth consultation no matter where you or your loved one is. It doesn't matter what hospital they're in, if they're at home. If you're not sure whether a certain treatment is ethical or not, if you want to help that person die a holy death, we're always here for you. And we're happy to do a telehealth consultation with the patient and or the family.
What do you think, Doctor, of what's going on around the world? For example, not too far from us, I live in southeastern Michigan, across the river in Canada. I mean, it's getting to the point where, and my question is, why can't people connect the dots? Why in the world do we need, if you think that people should be able to end their lives at any moment if they're having a bad day, they break a nail, I mean, they break up with their boyfriend or their girlfriend. This is what's happening in Canada. There has been testimony with pro-life representatives in Parliament in Canada saying that this is what's going to happen if they keep going down this path. And they're saying that by 2027, they could have laws in place adding to their already extreme agenda with euthanasia, where if someone is having an emotionally difficult time, they can walk into their doctor's office and get the medication to take their own life. What do we have to pay for if that's the case? Hotlines, right? Or counseling. And it's interesting, when I was doing some research on that, you follow the money, as I learned in journalism school early on, and they're saying that in Canada, the waiting list to get counseling, to get help for mental health, is very, very long, and it can be costly for the providers. So I'm wondering, is this another money grab for them?
You know, I think you're absolutely right about following the money. And American healthcare, again, has been taken over by large organizations that are very interested in margin. And it's a lot cheaper to kill someone than to pay for therapy and mental health care and inpatient psychiatric care.
So how do we stand up against that? What are you working on in terms of this Holy Death Initiative? How can we help?
Yeah, the Holy Death Initiative is really for people there who are in the facing death, right, and or their families, right, and their loved ones. But everything at My Catholic Doctor stands up against evil through the commitment of our clinicians, right? All of our clinicians are committed to practicing in accordance with Catholic teaching, to praying for the work, for praying for their patients. You know, we model ourselves after some very ancient physicians, Saints Cosmos and Damian, who, as well as some modern physicians, Saint Gianna, Venerable Jerome Lejeune, and Venerable Catherine Macaulay. These modern and ancient clinicians had something in common, which is that they were healing the whole person. They didn't separate their healing ministry from the use of science. And the Catholic Church has accepted cutting-edge science, the scientific method. They've accepted the scientific method since the scientific revolution, right? We're not Christian scientists. We believe that we can and should use the best and most modern science for the healing ministry. But that's not all of it. We also continue an ancient tradition of prayer, that Jesus Christ is a healer. We believe in miraculous healing. We believe in healing the soul. We believe in treating the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. In fact, we even believe that it's futile to heal the body and not the soul.
It's amazing to me, though, as I asked you early on in the interview, that given the evidence that's there for the connection between our well-being and our souls and our psyche, that the medical community has moved away from that. Because if you're able to heal the whole person, you can heal them more quickly if you're addressing those issues, as opposed to just trying to do the physical.
You're absolutely correct that it's evidence-based. There's research, and it's been ongoing for, out of big institutions like Duke and otherwise. There's many, many, many studies that show that people who engage in regular spirituality heal better and faster from a mental health perspective, from a physical perspective. But Teresa, to be honest and to answer your question, why isn't this research recognized? And why isn't it more implemented? I think it's following the dollar, and the problem is that American healthcare has been largely taken over by corporate organizations interested in margin.
So how are you able to, and I'm asking this very honestly because you're very brave to break out and do what you do, considering it could be at a cost to you professionally. How are you able to do this and still make a living given what you're up against out there? I'm serious. I mean, I think it's amazing.
No, the answer is by God's grace alone every day.
God's grace, right?
You know that.
Yeah, right.
We depend on donations. So the My Catholic Doctor Foundation is a 501c3 not-for-profit medical service organization. And we allow clinicians to practice independently and with the full voice of their faith and with the economy of scale that comes from being a part of a large organization that they need to survive in the American medical marketplace. And so we are a not-for-profit organization. Now, there's many other organizations, MSOs out there that are secular, they're private equity funded, et cetera, et cetera. So we didn't invent this model, but to the best of our knowledge, we're the only Catholic medical service organization, the only not-for-profit one out there. And so while these private equity funded organizations and public organizations are taking cuts off the top to feed the give money to their investors. We feed it all back into our care. So it's just not rocket science. Now, what's the catch? Why would anyone go to a organization that's skimming margins off the top instead of an organization that's putting the money back into the care? Well, the catch is that you have to be faithfully Catholic to join us. You have to agree to practice in accordance with Catholic teaching. You have to put your name and face on a website called My Catholic Doctor. And yes, that is extremely risky in the American medical marketplace right now. I mean, when I started this, one of my colleagues, I was at Washington University in St. Louis for many years, and one of my friends and colleagues told me, Kathleen, you're committing career suicide.
Wow. And you're in pediatrics, so I would think right now with this push with the whole transgender agenda, again, even more risk, right?
For sure. The trans agenda has been a pendulum swinging back and forth, but what was astounding is how quickly it swung to absurdity right outside of evidence-based research. I mean, the research that was being published in support of these studies was experimental, but not disclosed as experimental. And if you look at every other field, like take, for example, pediatric oncology, we use experimental treatments when there's no better option, but that's always disclosed to the patient, right? But somehow in this field it wasn't. And the quality of research being published was extremely poor. I have no other explanation for the pediatric transgender craze other than evil.
Right. It is just so evil, and it's so clear if you have eyes to see and ears to hear, doctor. If you look at it from a dignity of the human person perspective, made in the image and likeness of God, male and female, because the devil wants to strike down God's creation, right? And I mean, that is a direct attack on the human person.
That's right. And the human person, through the beauty of the incarnation in Christ took on a human body, right, in obedience to his Father. The incarnation teaches us how holy the human body is. And healthcare is such a sacred opportunity to accompany people in this universal experience of human suffering through illness, to care for the holiness of the human body. And if you try to remove those facts from healthcare, you're not going to get good healthcare.
The thing that amazes me is, and I'm just thinking of this as I have a journalism background, obviously not a medical background, but you are removing healthy body parts. At what point do you look at the oath that you take as a physician, do no harm? You have so many people now speaking out. I think of the most prominent, Chloe Cole, who talked about the horrible, horrible situation she was in. And nobody really sat down and talked to her why she felt the way she did at the time. She thought she needed the so-called transitional surgery. And she's out there talking about how now, and this, again, you mentioned money. We're following the dollar here. This is a big business. These people who go through this are patients for life. So it's very lucrative, not to mention that the surgery itself is very lucrative.
Yes, it's following the money, but in this case, I also think there's evil. And I have another question out there. My question is, how come our small organization with approximately 300 clinicians, I guess at this point we're a mid-sized organization, we're about 300 clinicians offering services 24/7, 365, 51 states, and soon to open in Puerto Rico. But it's our organization, to the best of our knowledge, is the largest organization offering detransitioner care.
Wow.
And these detransitioners, when they go back to the people that give them the drugs to change and did the surgeries to change, and they say, well, we want to detransition, they're usually abandoned based on the fact that, quote, there's no evidence basis, for this treatment, which is, of course, ridiculous because there's no good evidence basis for what they did either.
Right.
But my question is, why is our organization the largest organization rendering the
dealing
service?
with it?
What about all these academic institutions across the United States that have much more money than we do? What about large health systems that have huge foundations and much more money than we do? Where is their detransitioner clinic? There's not one centralized detransitioner clinic in the United States.
Do you think that given what happened in Great Britain with them putting the pause on the puberty blockers and the transitional surgeries, do you think people are becoming more aware? Because it's like under the Biden administration, they just kept going full speed ahead when all these stories were coming out about how problematic and the nightmare stories about this so-called transitional surgery.
It's still required education. So, for example, we recently got an email from a major insurance network that every one of our clinicians had to be trained in affirmation of gender fluidity in order to stay in this very major network. in America. And so it's an ongoing problem. It's true that the political climate has allowed for some improvements. It's true that the work of other countries, especially in Europe, is starting to shed truth in science and research, but we're still fighting this hard.
Wow. Well, God bless you for your courage and for all the great work that you do. And I'm so glad you're going to be on Jim and Joy, At Home with Jim and Joy. By the way, you can just check out EWTN.com/TV shows and just look up At Home with Jim and Joy for more information. Doctor, you're a hero, and God bless you, especially in the area of pediatrics, to be able to stand up and to help people like this. I know it's your faith that keeps you going, and the support of other doctors that have a similar strength as you do. I really hope people not only listen to this show, go back and listen to the archives, but also check out your website and listen to you and watch you on Jim and Joy at Home with Jim and Joy today. All right, so your website again, Doctor, give us the information, how people can find out.
MyCatholicDoctor.com, and let us take care of you next time you get sick. Call us the next time you have a sinus infection. We're here for you.
Okay. God bless you. Thank you so much, Dr. Kathleen Berchelmann. And she's in studio with us talking about true Catholic healthcare. Check out her great website, which is Catholic Doctor, mycatholicdoctor.com. Wow. I could talk to her for hours. And again, she's going to be on At Home with Jim and Joy. And we need to be aware, and we also need to make sure we do our homework. And if you go to her website, she has a ton of information on there. And there's also a great deal of research and help available with NFP, of course, and other help available for women who are struggling with fertility issues. It's a great website, tons of info. We'll be right back. Let you know what's coming up on a Tuesday. Stay tuned. Minutes past the hour, second hour, wrapping up of Catholic Connection on EWTN's Radio Extra. Wow. I'm so glad that Dr. Berchelmann is going to be on At Home with Jim and Joy and have more time to dive into these topics. Can you imagine being a doctor today? What challenges you have as a believer, especially in the one holy Catholic and apostolic faith. And thanks be to God that mycatholicdoctor.com is available for us. And from the beginning of life to the end of life, we are pro-life from womb to tomb, and a doctor like Dr. Kathleen can help us in all those different areas. All right, coming up tomorrow, there's a story that struck me, and also my colleague and friend and fellow reporter, Vanessa Denhar-Garmo, about this CBS reporter who claimed that he was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder after the shooting in Butler, Pennsylvania, involving, of course, President Donald Trump, but then candidate Donald Trump. Now, if you're talking about being in a situation that can be very frightening, and I've covered barricaded gunmen, I've covered shootings, I've covered fires, and so has Vanessa, and I've covered the Oklahoma City bombing and other tragedies. That in itself being there and having to deal with the tragedy, but you deal with it after the fact because it's breaking news and you have to go on autopilot and make sure you're covering the story. He wasn't talking about thinking, gosh, there might be another gunman, I might get shot, the candidate was shot, one person is dead, people are hurt, the developing story. He's thinking about himself, we'll discuss. And then Father Chris about the sacraments. All of that plus you on a Tuesday. Ciao, ciao. On to Monday.